to Textiles and Tea with the Handweavers Guild of America. I'm Kathy Group. I'm the Advertising and Marketing Manager for HGA, and I'm your host today. Today's sponsor is Greener Shades. They produce some beautiful, beautiful dyes that aren't only environmentally friendly, they're very people friendly. Learn more at www.gs.stillrivermill.com. We will take questions as usual today. If you'll put them in the Q&A, we'll get to those the last 15 minutes of the program. Love your comments and chat, but if it's a question, please put it in the Q&A. Today we have Alanna Wilcox. Alanna is an art teacher by day and a fiber artist by night. She loves sharing her passion about making things, especially projects that have to do with color and fiber. She earned an OHS Spinning Certificate with distinction in 2015 and the Master Spinning Certificate in 2017. We'll talk more about that later. She is the author of a spinning book, A New Spin on Color, and developed a dye formula to match digital images and colors. She'll explain more about that too. She is currently working on a book explaining her dye methodology, which will be released later this year. And working with fiber is something that she lives and breathes, sometimes literally. Welcome. It's great to have you here, Alanna.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much. It's a great honor to be here.
Well, great. Okay, most important question. What is your favorite tea?
Well, I came prepared for this, right? So not only is the tea that I have like a favorite, but I also think that it's really important, like the containers we have it in. So I made tea especially for this, right? So there's my mug, just to, you know, have a little sense of humor with it. But I love fennel tea. That's like my favorite to have at night, and my favorite in the morning is green tea. So this way I'm not up all night.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yep.
So how did you get started in spinning and fibers?
So I've pretty much been a lover of textiles and fiber and threads and all of that my whole entire life. Mm-hmm. You know, I started when I was little, and my grandmother taught me how to crochet. We then did little needlepoint and cross stitch kits, and that sort of went into like doing more complex ones like counted cross stitch when I was in high school. I kind of learned a little bit about knitting, but I never really worked off of patterns, right? So I just kind of like learned the technique, and I would just keep going until I had something, and then, you know, would stop because I didn't know how to bind off. And then when I was in college, I was an English art major, and so I was taking an American literature class, and there was a professor there that she brought in a crazy quilt. And when I saw it, it's one of those things that I don't know where people first pick up their passion for, you know, textiles and fibers, but sometimes there's a piece you see that it has like a profound influence on you, and it kind of just changes the way you think about, you know, creating and fiber and like all of that. So when I saw this quilt, it blew my mind, right? And I knew immediately that this is the thing that I wanted to start making. And so I've been working on this one for 21 years. I just finished it like last week. But while I was making it, everywhere that I would go, I would collect things. I would collect beads and fabrics and threads. And they were kind of pieces that sort of were like documenting, you know, vacations, where I traveled to, the people I was with and all of that. But I also wanted to incorporate the people and the things that were important to me. And so specifically to spinning, I had a cat, I had a ragdoll cat. He was like my best friend. And he had very soft, fluffy fur. And I thought, if there was a way that I could turn his fur into embroidery thread, then, you know, I would be able to incorporate him into this quilt. And so I reached out to, you know, some people that I knew that were dyers. And I said, you know, hey, like, you know how I could get this turned into yarn? And they sent me off to a local spinners guild. And, you know, basically one thing led to another. And it took me at least, I would say, 10 years of pausing working on the quilt before I could come back to it, because I was so obsessed with spinning. And like the crazy quilt set, fire off in my heart for, the combination of fibers and yarns and beads and all of that. Spinning it did something to me that, like, when I was touching the fiber and I felt the twist turning it into yarn, it was so magical that, like, I couldn't do anything else. So I was consumed with it.
That's amazing. And you just finished the quilt?
Yeah. So
Do you have it?
I do.
Oh, that's amazing.
So it's
wow.
It's fairly large. And then also on the back, I didn't want to use like a regular fabric, so I dyed it and I painted it as well. So it's supposed to be the night sky, but I can show you specifically. Okay, here. So that's my cat. Where did you go? There. Okay, so that's my cat's fur that I spun and embroidered to make it look like he was kind of curled up in a little ball sleeping, because every time I would work, he would always come and hang out next to me. So he would always be in a little ball next to me. So I put him that way on the quilt.
Well, I am so honored that you debuted your finished quilt on Textiles and Tea. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
No problem. No
I
problem.
love that. It's so, it's not like the usual quilt where there's squares, and it's very, you just look like you could see the whole traveling through that. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's free form. And I think that's the one thing that maybe I approach, creation in a way that's maybe like a bit different than other people. Cause like I said, when I learned knitting, I didn't really learn from a pattern. And when, I did the quilting, I was never a quilter before. So, I read books on it, and I'm kind of self-taught. And if you know anyone that's self-taught, they sometimes develop like habits or ways of doing things that are not the standard or the traditional way of doing them. So, yeah.
Well, you mentioned being passionate about spinning. What do you think it is about spinning that just you get all consumed with it, that it makes you so passionate?
I think aside from like the magic of like seeing the transformative process of like fiber turning into yarn so that there's like a physical state transformation, I think that there's something really special about what part of the creation process that you want to jump into, right? Like, so as a chef, okay, if I were to make tomato sauce, I could start at any different point, right? So I could start by going to a restaurant and like adding Parmesan cheese from the table and there, like, you know what I mean? Like I could cook like that, but I could also go not only to be a gardener and grow my own tomatoes, but I could, research the seeds, right? And I feel like as spinners, we can pick what part of the process that we want to kind of like begin the creation, right? So like we can be a shepherd and raise the animal. We can, go and get the raw fleece. We can get it when it's prepared but not dyed. We can get it when it's dyed. So I think knowing that we can have such control over the outcomes is really fascinating. And so like here in this piece, this is probably like my most favorite piece that I've created, because even though I followed, this is Stephen West's pattern, but what I tried to do is I tried to interpret the characters from The Wizard of Oz and how they would look in yarn form. And so I literally went through the movie. And so some yarns are commercial, like, so I started with Toto, and then I combined like different weaving yarns that I had that were thin, so I could get like a mohair kind of Karen Terrier texture. And then, as I moved through, I started to think about, okay, if I'm going to spin a tornado yarn, right, what qualities or properties would a tornado yarn have? And so I was able to kind of just play and have fun with it, and not think so much about, is this right or is this wrong? It was really just more about I could create the yarn, and even though the yarn, unfortunately, like in the art world, they may not see that as being art, but like that each one could be their own standalone piece. And so I have this over here. I made this little kind of like version of it. So those are all of the yarns that were used, so it goes from Toto all the way down to the Emerald City. So yeah.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
Thank you.
And I love how you documented it. I mean, I'm
Yeah, I
ashamed to
mean,
say I'm terrible at that, but that's
that's
wonderful that you
something
keep
that
track.
that's something that I do like pretty, sorry, I didn't mean to make you spit your tea out. Yeah, but no, and okay, so maybe this seems a bit excessive, but also this year I learned that I have ADHD. And so what was interesting about that is that I always thought that that meant as a teacher that a student wasn't able to focus. I didn't realize that there's a component where you can hyper focus and hyper fixate on things. And so I feel like with fibers, I do that to like the nth degree. So I have people that are like, oh my goodness, like what? And it's like, no, this is exciting to me, So whenever I start a project, I don't know if you've ever seen Homeland, but I kind of turn into Carrie, like when she's in the room and like has all the strings and post-it notes everywhere. Like that's how I get when I get into a project. So yeah, so I don't know if you'll be able to see it. Let me see if I can pop it out real quick, because I think this is kind of cool. Hang on. So basically what I did, I don't know, this is just what I get a kick out of, right? But over here, like I have these little embroidery floss bobbins. I'm trying to get it so you can see, right? And then on the top, I have it where it says, mix of like 4 or 5 or like all these different numbers. And so what I did was I wrote down like the weaving cones that I took them from. So I had like some Saori cones, I had some knitting yarns, and I wrote down all of the sources. And then for the Toto yarns, I tried to combine different ones to see which ones did I like. So I combined like cone 1 and cone 4. And when I put them together, like how did that look? And, and then I did all these bobbins. And so I was able to sample and swatch relatively quickly. I knew which ones I combined together. And even though the shawl is done, if I ever wanted to recreate it, now I have this documentation process, because I always tell myself, I'm going to remember what I did, and then I don't. And so then these instances come where people say, well, how did you do that? And now I could very clearly articulate that. So.
Well, you're an example for us all. We're all going to do that.
No, because no, there's downsides to it too.
Okay. Well, you've completed the Master Spinner program from the Ontario Handweavers and Spinners Guild. Now, first of all, for people who don't know what that is, can you explain a little bit about what that program is and what that means? And then what did it mean for you to complete that?
Sure. So what it is, it's basically as close as you can get to going to college or to going, to school for spinning, right? And so it was run through an organization, but it took place on a college campus. At the time, you actually got college credit for taking it. So it was almost like a non-credit bearing or a I forgot the academic term for it. You get a credit for it, but it's not necessarily a degree that you're working towards, so right. It's like that level. And so you would go for 9 days over the summer, and it was taught by people that completed the program themselves. So you had anywhere from like 5 to 6 teachers for the week. And they would kind of bounce back and forth between what they were teaching, right? So like year 1 was wool and acid dyes. And then, year 2 was, combing, and we started to do natural dyes. And so it was kind of a successive, like each year built off of the last, so that you had these like 6 years. So it pretty much covered everything. It covered the tools, how to use them, how to sort a fleece, grade a fleece, different equipment, just pretty much everything you can think of, like novelty yarn, like all of it, right? Exotic fibers, cellulose fibers. And so when you go through that, you really begin to appreciate not just necessarily like the technical part of spinning, but all the facets that kind of go into it, because then you have to also think about end use and what are you spinning for. And so that, I think, is what kind of led me to being very methodical and keeping good notes, or maybe better notes than I was normally keeping, because you had to for these homework assignments, right? So not only were you going to learn for these 9 days, but then you would come home, you would be completely overwhelmed with like all this information you were given. And then on average, you had about 250 hours, I would say, give or take, of homework assignments that you would have to do throughout the year. So there was like 4 or 5 mailing dates that you would have to, submit your yarns or your projects to. And then the instructors would grade them, they would give you feedback and send it back. And so when you go through this, you know, you learn like how to get better, not only in the spinning part, but you have to document what you do, right? So you have to say what direction you're spinning in, what tools you use, the entire process. And it's basically treated as though you're creating something that's going to be presented as like a guild table display type of thing. And that anyone that looks at what you're creating is basically, they should be able to recreate it. So I don't know if you can, I'm going to just tilt my camera up, but up on top, all of those binders that you see, those are each year's homework binders. And there's a couple that are missing because I'm planning workshops. So I do use those as resources and pull them out and get my, you know, examples to show. Like I pulled one out to show later on, but yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. So as far as
6 years to complete.
So
6
6
summers?
years, yeah, 6 years is for the spinning certificate,
Right.
the base one, if you will. And then to become a master spinner, basically it's like a thesis. So now you have to pick a topic, one that was never covered before, and two, you're basically working independently and you have a span of 2 years to complete it. And so what you need to do is, after you articulate like what it is you're going to study, then you have to develop 20 samples, both in a swatch form as well as a skein, having all the documentation. And then I think it was like 3 to 5 projects that are like the culminating pieces. And so, you know, yeah, so like what it meant for me to go through that was that I had a really strong, solid foundation, not only on, like I said, the spinning, but also like on dyeing, on tools and equipment, and really understanding how all the pieces and parts work together.
Well, with all of that research that you did and all the sampling and everything, did that lead you to, and I may have this wrong, did that lead you to create the precision matching system that you created, that incredible system about how to match dyeing to the exact color?
Yes, yes. So it wasn't necessarily something that they taught, like that wasn't,
Right.
they didn't go there. But you know, I'm someone that I'll have an idea, and then again, you know, I hyper focus, right? And I run with it. So I had an idea based on this artist. For those of you that might be familiar, it's a photorealistic painter. His name is Chuck Close. And so he was able to match colors using the same colors that are used in a printer to do these photorealistic paintings using airbrush, right? And so I thought, well, if he's able to do it with paint, then I should be able to do this with dye. And so I created a guide that I called like Dyeing to Get the Colors You Want, and I based it off of CMYK. And so I used that picture as my reference for my year 1 project. And we had to have like a culminating, you know, final project every year, right? So what you're looking at are gloves that I overzealously like scoured the fleece, I dyed it, washed it, carded it, spun it, and knitted it in a span of, I would say, about 2 months. So it would, and I documented everything. So the gloves from raw fleece to finished gloves took 115 hours. And I had to document everything. So over here, I have the actual gloves, but I just want you to see. So, you know, I have like the binder, right? That like all of the swatches are in, and you know, I have like all of, you know, all of the samples and everything. So when I went through it, right, I basically was trying to see like what colors can I do to get this match, right? Like how can I match it? Unfortunately, I don't know what ink Hewlett Packard uses, and I don't know what ink Staples uses, right? So there was a lot of trial and error, and I was really struggling with trying to find the right dye and the right the concentration of it. So I created the guide as a way of letting people know, especially for people that may have a difficult time coming up with like color palettes from pictures, or they might not have like a really good like color theory understanding, right? So like you might know that yellow and blue makes green. But if you're trying to get a khaki color, like what should you add? Should you add red? Should you add brown or black? So it's kind of just to help people get a better sense of like color theory and pulling colors from photos, but it doesn't give specific information about what dyes to use. So that's kind of where this phase 2 came in of my precision color matching system, because now I've been able to articulate specifically what brands of dyes you need, what colors you need, and all of that. So it's very turnkey.
So how does this work? Do I contact you and say, I'm trying to match this color, and then you help me do it? Or
no,
so
what you would do is you would tell me the color you want, and then I have everything already configured. So I have, yeah, so like you can see over here, right? So like if you told me the color and in digital terms, right, in order to tell me the color, you would have to tell me what is referred to as the hex color number. Okay, so if you select, like I selected a color, you know, green, like that mint green off of the dome. And so I basically pulled that color off, and then I have these PDFs as like a formula. And so it breaks down what brands of dyes you would need, what the percentages is. If you're someone that does, you know, like a 2% solution, for those of you that are not dyers, you're probably like, what is she talking about? But for those of you that are like kind of maybe a more intermediate or advanced dyer, you know, I have the ability to change it so that the depth of shade can be whatever you start with if you have a stock solution, or you can use powder. And I have all of these numbers figured out. So like all you have to do is literally click on the pixel on the dome and say, hey, I want to match this. And I will tell you what colors you would need to be able to do it, you know? So yeah, so I have over like 2,000 colors. So it may not be like 100% close, but what it does do is it allows you to get within that bullseye ring, and then you can tweak and modify it just like a recipe. So I would say my system is akin to, if you think of an Oreo, right? Like, you know what an Oreo tastes like, how the texture is and all of that. So I can get you to like the, you know, grocery store version of that Oreo, you know, the generic brand of that Oreo. But then you can modify it, right? So like if you like Oreos that are more chocolatey than the one that they sell, you can make those changes. So it's not something that is, I want to say like a fixed thing. It's something that as a dyer, you can take it and play with it and go off in all sorts of different creative directions with it. So I'm just really excited about it.
Now, my ignorance is going to show here. Is this something that weavers, spinners, can you dye the same way on cloth, or does it work better for yarn or fleece?
Well, so as part of my rabbit hole journeying that I like to do, one of the experiments that I did for it, so I basically kind of put together almost like a textbook, if you will, for my system. And part of it was sharing my different experiments. So one of my experiments, because I know different dyers have different, there's so many variables in dyeing, right? But one of them specifically is the base, okay? Like, what are you dyeing on? So I basically looked at over, I don't know, I think maybe it was like 35 or so different bases, and I used the same color formula, right? So I took, you know, everything from silk cocoons to silk fabric to silk yarn, to silk hankies, you know, like the whole gamut. And I dyed the same color, right? And I dyed it with wool. I did it with, you know, superwash versus, you know, non-superwash. I did grease locks, scoured locks when it was in roving form or comb top form, and then as yarn, so that anyone that's looking at the formulas, right? Like, let's say you're looking at a color, and I'm giving you the color based on what the color would look like on superwash merino wool / nylon blend. So with that, you can then say, okay, I see how the color changed going on silk fabric. So maybe I have to bump up the saturation by maybe like 3 times or whatever, so that I can get that same intensity. Actually, one of the really cool things, and like so stop me if I'm going too long here, but one of the really cool things that I learned about this, because I don't know like what people use dye for in, their end uses, right? Like I know what I use it for, but with silk cocoons, I don't know what people, maybe like silk cocoons get used for jewelry or like ornamentation. So I took a bunch of silk cocoons. I weighed them so that they were like, I mean, it was the same ratio for all of the colors and the fabrics and everything like that I dyed, but I dyed the cocoons, right? So I took like, let's say 10 cocoons, but they had the little pupa in it, right? Like the little like worm thing before it turns into the moth. And so when I dyed them, I didn't account for the weight of the bug. So what I did was I cut one open and I weighed a bug. Okay. And then I said, okay, in ratio to the weight of the silk cocoon to the body, this is the difference, right? Like of how much it'd be. So I reduced the amount of dye and I dyed the silk cocoons with the bug in it, but with the reduction. And then I dyed silk cocoons without the bug at that same concentration. And so they were basically the same color. So I was able to even, figure those things out. And I think that's the part that I get really excited about, that there's nothing out there like this. I'm kind of going like rogue here and I'm just exploring questions that pop into my head, and so I really tried to think about maybe like not necessarily what objections people would have with it, because I know there might be some dyers that are like, well, you can't match colors, that's just impossible. And so then there are people like me that are like, well, challenge accepted, one, but two, I want to make it simple for people that are really struggling, and my whole I guess like outlook as a fiber artist is what I'm doing, and my nature as a teacher too, is I want to be able to share how the information filtered through me so that you will have the ability to do it exactly like how I do. I don't, it's like if you go to a cooking school and the chef says, okay, put the ingredients together, and you're like, yeah, but like mine doesn't taste like yours. Like, do you ever see those Pinterest fails, right? It's like the recipe said to make this cake, and I don't know about you, but I mean, I made a German chocolate cake, and they said to put the cake, the whipped cream, the cake. Mine started to do like a landslide, and then like the cakes were just like sliding off to the floor, and I'm like trying to catch them, and I'm like, this is not working. And so I don't want people to have that experience. I want people to know, okay, this is the color I want, and like this, I'm gonna get this close. And maybe your cake topper is not gonna slide completely off. Maybe the whipped cream might be a little bit flat, but it's not gonna be anywhere like just trying on your own and wasting time and materials and dye. I mean, dyeing is a very long, methodical process. I would say that to get the right color probably takes even longer than like, how long to figure out a warp for a loom. Because that took me like, that's, I mean,
you've done so much, you've done so much of the work already. It's amazing.
Yeah, I really wanted to cut that time, because I feel like also a lot of dyers are like, they're not just it's not just like a career, or they're not like just a robot, there's artistry to it as well. And I think that there's a real like sacredness about the time that it takes to develop your system, right? And your color sense and all of that. And so I feel like every dyer that kind of gets passionate about dyeing and wants to cross to that bridge of maybe selling or doing it on a larger scale, it's very isolating, and so unless like you're best friends with someone that's willing to share their secrets with you, a lot of time it just takes trial and error. And so I really want to reach out to all of those dyers that are like, I don't know how to get here. Like, why is this so difficult? And it's like, it doesn't have to be. It's just that, for the most part, I think that there's like a guardedness about sharing information about dyeing. But since I don't sell yarn, or like I don't dye for production, I'm happy to share what I do with others.
Oh, wow. Well, let me take you back to spinning. I want to talk some more about spinning. Now, you've done a lot of exploring about spinning and you've learned a lot. So do you think that understanding dyeing has helped you spinning? And do you think understanding spinning has helped your dyeing?
Oh, definitely. But I mean, I think I think that's with everything, right? Like if you, and again, I use the food analogy because, maybe if people aren't spinners or dyers, they can relate to food. But the fact, if you're a gardener, right? Like, what you're doing in the garden, how that's going to influence the flavor of the food, right? Like, so if you like overwater something, or like if you use fertilizer, like it can make it have a more robust flavor, when to pick the vegetables and all of that. But as a chef, if you have something that's not ripe, like an avocado, you might know what to do with it to kind of make it more palatable. Like, I don't know if it's like throwing it in the microwave or whatever. I'm not like avocado pro, but there are things like knowing on both ends, right? So like if I can grow a really great avocado and I'm really good at cooking with avocados, then when I come together and eat that avocado, or like make something with it, like I'm going to be more successful. And I think the same thing applies to spinning and dyeing. So when I go to spin, a lot of times, people will say, I like to spin for fun. And that's great, but do you like the results you get? And sometimes people will go through the motions of doing it because it's very meditative, and I'm all for that. But even when I'm doing meditative spinning and kind of just like wanting to relax and not think about what it's for, I just want to have fun with it, I still want to have a sense of what it could be, right? Because really the only material that we can stash is our time. And so if I'm going to be putting time into creating these yarns, I want to know that they're going to be, either usable or functional, or that the outcome of them, if it's just yarn for yarn's sake, like that's great. Like if that's how you like to work, that's fine. But for me, I want to know that every time I'm creating something, it's with a very like concentrated purpose, even if it's just for fun. Like if that's the purpose, if it's just for fun, fine. But I think knowing that when I'm spinning, then I can dye the fiber so that I can get those results that I'm after, without wondering why it looked like mud after spending so much time, spinning it, right? So
yeah. Well, you teach a variety of spinning classes, and you do a variety of teaching of a lot of things. So I think it's always important that you help beginners not get discouraged and kind of feel overwhelmed or like, I can't do this. So what is it that you tell your students to keep them engaged and not to give up or just think they can't do this? Because it's hard at the beginning, especially spinning.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think one of the things, whenever we're, I don't necessarily consider myself to be like an expert, in something. I'm always approaching things with a student mentality. And I know that every time I try something new, there's going to be this like fear of failure, right? And that I might say to myself, well, I can't do this because XYZ, right? Like right. I can't be a fiber artist because, my father told me that I'm not going to make money doing it, or something crazy like that. So if we tell the way that we talk to ourselves is more important than any instructions, than any teacher, than, anything like at all like that, right? It's really more about our attitude. And I think when students come to a workshop or a class, they're coming with the hope that you're going to give them confidence to be successful. So they're not really coming to learn how to do something specifically. They just want the confidence to be able to do it themselves.
Wow.
And so a successful teacher, I think, is somebody that is able to give a student the tools to be successful. And so in the beginning of the school year, I have this little quote that I kind of made up, and I know that there's all different, forms and versions of it. But basically, I like to tell my students that their self-talk is going to be what dictates the outcome, right? And so if they tell themselves, because so many times I'll hear them say like, I can't draw, I can't paint. Well, first of all, wonderful, because now I can do my job. Like if you came here knowing it, what would the sense of that be, of me having a job as a teacher? But if you tell yourself you're going to try, not that you're going to succeed, not that you're not going to make mistakes, but if you just tell yourself, I'm just going to try this, I'm going to see what happens, I'm going to be open to the outcomes, I'm going to embrace the mistakes that I make, because then that's going to let me know what I don't like so that I can move in a direction more towards what I do like. And then I think that kind of changes it. And this is applicable to anything in life, right? Mm-hmm. So like I'm making I'm making these little pancakes, okay? So I'm making a little factory. So there's my little pancake. Now, I've never made a knitted pancake before. So, right. But I thought, okay, I don't want this to just be a regular pancake. I'm all about the details. So I'm like, okay, I want to make it so that there's maple syrup, right? So I'm like, well, what could I use for maple syrup? So I tried, I saw there was like corn syrup mixed with food coloring, but that like didn't dry very well. So then I tried clear glue mixed with watercolor paint. And then I got this color, right? And I was like, that's not quite maple syrup, but I never did it before. Like I didn't know how it was going to turn out. So then I'm like, okay, I'm going to try again. So then I got like more of this like translucent kind of maple syrup color. And the idea is that I went in not saying to myself, I can't make maple syrup out of something that's not syrup because I've never done it before. And there's no instructions on how to do it. I said, I'm going to kind of go into this with like a childlike attitude of I'm going to try, I'm going to play, I'm going to have fun, I'm going to see what happens. And I think when we get older, we tend to move away from that zone and that space of playing and embracing, experiencing things that are novel just for the sake of the experience, right? Like we want there to be an outcome, or we want there to be, perfection and success on the first go. But anything that we're good at came from the fact that we tried something that we never did before, but we didn't allow the mistakes and the failures that we made to prevent us from to continue to try, right? So like, if I'm good at spinning, I made a lot of not good yarns. Okay. So like over here, this is, one of my first hand spun yarns, and I absolutely love it. So I don't know, my camera's probably not going to focus, but like that would be considered an underplied yarn, right? Like that's not like a good yarn, if you will. And I don't know if I have any hand spun that's here that I can show you, but the idea is that, I worked towards it. I made mistakes. I got better. Now I know with experience what I need to do to correct that. So.
Well, you mentioned earlier when you were talking about your students that you had talked about craft versus art. Mm-hmm. So why do you have that topic with that discussion with your students? And what do you tell them about craft versus art? It's a touchy
first, I want to make sure that the screen is not going to allow any tomatoes to be thrown at me, right? So like if you're at home watching this or wherever you're at and you want to throw tomatoes at the screen, like I just want to make sure they're not going to come through. Okay. So first of all, art is one of those things that's a very, I want to say like heated topic. Okay. Oh, yeah. And so when I'm teaching art to students, I think that I don't want to say like a trap, but like imagine going down to elementary school hall past the art room, right? And you see outside all of the students' work. Okay. How many times do you see work that might be very cookie cutter or everybody looks the same? Okay, so you might have a template that everyone then went off and designed themselves, like a coloring book, right? So there's these really elaborate adult coloring books, and everybody can approach it very differently. Okay, they can use like markers, color pencils, and all of that. But there's not really an idea behind it. So there's creation, right? Like, and you can come at something in a creative way. But it's more like the teacher is saying, okay, this is the idea. Now I want you to apply skill. Okay. And so for me as a teacher, okay. I don't come at teaching that I am going to be the one that's like filling your cup with information, right? Mm-hmm. I see myself more like I'm a guide. I'm going to present ideas to you. And what I would like you to do, or like, I'm going to kind of present like a challenge to you, for example, but I'm not going to give you a solution and say, copy this solution. I'm going to say to you, how would you solve this? So in this instance here, right, what I try to get them to think about before we even make art is that there is a component of art that I'm going to refer to as skill. Okay. So as spinners, and fiber, enthusiasts, right? We need to have skills in order to create, right? Like I need to know how to use a knitting needle. I need to know how, hard to beat the yarn to get it to be consistent and even and all of that. But to me, I think, again, like, you know, everybody can have their own interpretation, that I think to me, what makes something art is when there's a very strong and powerful idea or concept behind it that you're then pairing with the skill. And so like in this example over here, right, those plates, like I could have gone to a workshop and the teacher could have said, okay, we're going to be making 12-inch plates. This is how you break up the glass. This is, you know, how you make a mosaic. This is how you fuse it together. So what I created is almost like a hands-on skill building exemplar, right? I was able to improve my skill, but I didn't bring any, what I think like an idea or a concept to it. So just like going back to that Wizard of Oz show, what I think is interesting about that is, in my opinion, as a spinner and a knitter, I thought that was art, right? Because I took something that didn't exist as a yarn and I created it. But art galleries told me that you can't submit art that has any kind of influence from someone else. So because it wasn't a pattern that I wrote, I was not allowed to submit it as a work of art to be judged. And as a fiber artist, that really frustrated me, because then I'm thinking, well, you know what? Like, I'm not a pattern designer. So how can I submit my yarn as art without having a pattern design, right? Because like that's not a part that I'm really very skilled at. So what I did, and that's why I made this, is I thought it would be fun to kind of submit it like where the yarn was just mounted, and then call it like Wizard of Oz Deconstructed or something like that. So I'm going to keep pushing this idea that like yarn can be art. Like it doesn't have to be this end use thing. But it's very difficult as someone that works in, you know, textiles of any kind for it to be considered art, you know. And so when I was showing that the glass body of the broken glass body of the woman, to me, that was more in the art spectrum side, because you're taking the idea of, you know, a body and identity and the physical and emotional shattering and kind of putting back together, and you can have this whole story kind of developed. And I'm not saying that the plate doesn't have that, but I'm saying that I don't want students to just kind of copy me, right? But I would say that the person that's designing the original shawl, right, like the original pattern, they are the artist. They took an idea and they took their skill and they put it together. But if I'm modifying their idea, like let's say you have, you know, in songs and in music, right? Like in rap, they do sampling. So you might take a song that someone else did and incorporate it into your own. Like how much borrowing, how much copying or hashing of someone else's idea does it take before it becomes your own? Like Andy Warhol was able to take images, you know, and like reconstitute them, and then it counted as art. So I think that there's definitely that space to debate what is and what is not art. But what I really wanted the students to understand was that I didn't want them to think that I was going to give them the answer. And a lot of times there's what is referred to as learned helplessness, right? Like, I don't know how to do this, or, you know, you need to do this because I'm stuck. I'm not going to go on. I'm like, no, I'm not the artist, you are, but I'm going to give you the skills to get over that. And then I think that's how I approach teaching, and why I start with that conversation.
We've talked about that concept before on this show. And one of the things we talked about was a book called Steal Like an Artist. And his concept is, and a couple of people have commented, Barbara Long says, is there anything completely original without influence out there, right? And the concept behind the book, Steal Like an Artist, is that you start with someone else's idea, whatever, and then you make it your own. So that's a great concept. And it makes me look at teaching differently, rather than, I guess I always thought in terms of skill, but your idea that you give confidence. I like that. That's a lovely idea.
Well, and I mean, you know, as an art teacher too, it's kind of, I don't know, maybe like a bugbear of mine when someone says, well, you can't teach creativity. And my thinking is, well, then no one ever taught you how to think creatively, right? Like, so no one taught you that skill, right? It's a skill to be creative. We all have creativity. Like, I don't care, like we all have creativity, right? Like, you assembled your outfit this morning, that took, you know, ideas and pairing and all of that, right? So we all have creativity. Now, just like a muscle, okay, if you don't exercise it, if you don't, if you're not even aware of what it is, then you may think you don't have it. But my job is to kind of like water it, tend to it, and help you see that, in fact, yes, you are a creative being. You do have your own ideas. You do have your own experiences. And when you can tap into those, then I think that's what makes really strong, powerful art. When you're not copying someone, but you're allowing something to kind of go through you and then interpret your experience. And I think that's why I love my Wizard of Oz shell so much. And I think that's why when people look at it, they get excited and happy by it, because I took something that I had as an experience, and then I allowed my skill to have that filter through me and express what that experience was like. But I didn't necessarily look and see, well, how does one make a tornado yarn? That wasn't the lens that I was approaching it from. And so when I can teach people to just think of things in ways that might be different, than they've thought about things before, then that opens up possibilities. So I'm not telling you what's right or wrong. I'm just saying, try to not be closed off to only two options of right or wrong. Try to open up your mind to just playing, and then pick what's right for you.
Well, one thing I love to hear from people, I think it tells you a lot about them as an artist and as a person, is what is the most important item in your studio?
So, everything that I have here is all stuff that can be purchased and, thrown away and all of that. But the thing that is the most important to me, I actually have, and forgive me for those of you that might find this a bit morbid, but I have my mother's ashes, and she passed away this year from complications with MS. And so she had MS right before she got pregnant with me, because the doctors basically said, you can't have kids. And she was like, no, I'm going to show you. So I'm an only child, but she had me, and I loved her spunk and her spirit, and the fact that she was always open to playing. And so I kind of have her ashes close by to me as a reminder that, I'm getting to do the things that I love that maybe she wasn't able to do. So it's kind of this reminder of play each day, enjoy each day. It may not be great in all aspects, but compared to the alternative, it's really not that bad. To just really be appreciative. So when I have that as my grounding, everything else is just icing on the cake.
Well, we're kind of running out of time. I got one more
Sure.
question before we go to the questions from the audience. It's you're going to be teaching at Convergence this summer.
Mm-hmm.
So if all of y'all who are falling in love with her and the way she thinks, sign up for her class. But also, what else is new for you? I know you talked about a new book coming out, right? You want to talk some about that?
Sure, yeah. So the book is actually going to be part of this system that I'm developing. So while I do have the individual color formulas, I'm really trying to kind of roll it out or launch it as a full-on system, because there's lots of pieces and parts and components, like I said, with my experimentation and exploration of the different dye bases, and how colors can be modified and pushed and all of that. There's a lot of just moving parts to it. And so I have a dye calculator that's also incorporated into it, so that people can just input weight of goods, what they're trying to dye, and boom, they have the color. But it's not like a standalone thing. So I'm trying to develop something that I would say is akin to a college course that would allow for a very small group, one-on-one mentoring, and to develop a community of dyers that have the ability to kind of take their dyeing to a next level, to be a lot more successful with it, whether you're an indie dyer or if you're a costumer or whatever your dyeing, interests and needs are, but to really kind of up your game, to be more precise with color, more creative with color, and just really to be able to support people and coach people. So fingers crossed that'll all be happening, in the end of winter. So yeah, the book isn't going to be available probably until next year, but it's going to be part of this course that I'm putting together, this system.
Well, that's great. And again, you heard it here first.
Yes.
Okay, we've got tons of questions. So let's see if we can hit some of these questions. Somebody wanted to know, what was the topic of your master's spinner project?
So my book that I wrote over here the new spin on color. Basically all of the swatches in it, that was like what my thesis was about. So it's basically how can a spinner approach spinning color for different color outcomes. And I thought the best way to illustrate that was to take one like piece of wool, like, so it's called dye top, and have it be the same colors, but spin it 20 plus different ways to show like those outcomes. And then I had 3 final projects where I used 3 of those techniques. So basically the book is my thesis, you know, plus some, you know, whipped cream on top.
How do you account, this is from KW,
Okay.
how do you account for the differences in fleece color in your dyeing formula?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So again, I do have like the bases, right, that people could see, but I think that's also part of the artistry, right? So I love gray over dyed color, you know, I think that it just brings like a richness to it. But as a dyer, right, if you understand that you're using a darker base, then you know that that's going to be an added element to it, right? Like, so if I'm starting off with salted butter, I'm not going to be able to get that profile of salt out of the dish. I know that going in. So again, it's like there's an artistry to it. It's not, I don't want to say, not like you're making an assumption like it's going to be like one size fits all, but when you can see it, and that's why I refer to it as a system, because when you can see it as a full thing, then it changes the dynamic of how you approach dyeing and using color.
Okay.
So I hope that helps.
Dorothy Miller says, I exclusively dye yarn and fiber with ProChem dyes. What percentage in your precision matching formula do you use ProChem dyes? She says she doesn't want to buy more dyes, and she wants to try to figure out how useful it would be since she uses ProChem.
Yeah. So again, I tell my students, you know, don't tell yourself you can't, right? Just try. So when I tried to develop the colors, I wasn't aware. So my expert level dyers will know what I'm talking about, but like the pigments in dyes, there's only so many that are what are referred to as pure pigments, right? So like that means that if I'm looking at, for example, a purple dye, it could be a true purple, or it could be like 1 part blue and 1 part red, or it could be like 2 parts red and 1 part blue. So when I started, I tried to use primary colors, right? So I tried to use red, blues, and yellows, but not all yellows are pure pigments, right? So a yellow could be like 90% yellow and like 10% red to make it, you know, a warmer, like a warmer red, like a golden yellow. So because of that, when I was using the colors, like I said, I tried to just go a single line of dyes. It didn't quite work out. So my formulas use 4 different brands. So I use ProChem, Dharma, Jacquard, and Greener Shades. Now, again, in the book, I have what I refer to as a color calibration approach, so that if you want to use dyes that are different than mine, you can then figure out what mine looked like, and then you can modify your primaries to get there so that it'll work. But I also in the book have examples of one color formula, but that it was dyed in, I think maybe like over 10 different dye brands. So you can see how, like, if you follow the recipe, 50% yellow and 50% blue makes green, but you use blue and yellow from one company, blue and yellow from another, they're going to be very different. So again, it's the artistry, it's a system, and then understanding how you can make it work for yourself, you know. But I do offer project consultations and dye consultations. So if people are trying to get a color and they're not sure how, I'm happy to do that as well.
Michaela wants to know, hi, Michaela, do you have a math background?
So what's interesting is I think the way my brain works as a neurodivergent is that simple things are very difficult for me and complicated things are very like accessible to me. So when I try to do simple math, I get really frustrated because like so many times when things go wrong for me, it's because it might be something stupid like a decimal was out of place, right? But as far as conceptualizing things, I'm very visual. And so if I said, 50% of 100 as numbers, it doesn't make sense. But if you showed me an apple pie cut in half, I'm like, got it, right? So I'm mathematical inclined in a visual way, but not necessarily in the remembering things way, So I took AP calculus, but I never did well on the test because I could never remember formulas.
Well, someone's asking about your book, Ann Wolper. Can you hold your book up again?
Oh, sure.
And can we get this on your website or through your
as a matter of fact the FedEx truck came today, and I just got like a huge pallet in, so they're all stocked up for any personal shopping, holiday shopping, all of that. Yes, so you can definitely get yours for a friend. They're all here, so yep, you can order it through me.
Excellent Christmas present, holiday present.
Yes.
I think that's very good. Debbie Pfister. She said hi earlier on comments.
Hello.
She said, can you give dye formulas just using primary dyes like magenta, yellow, cyan, and black, and not proprietary mixes, peach blush, for example? Does that make sense?
No.
Okay. Sorry, Debbie.
I'm not sure what she means by that, but like as far as my formulas go, I believe it's like either 17 or 18 primaries that I use to then make up everything else. But what I do when I have them, it's broken down into percentages too. So for those that might not like want to weigh dye powder or mess with syringes, I do have them broken down into percentages. So for those of you that are like, just tell me that it's 75% blue and 25% yellow and I'm good, I'll figure the rest out on my own. I have it open-ended for those creatives, but I also have it where it's like, to the 0.01, like the 10th decimal place as well.
Now, would you repeat again the 4 people that the dyes you said Dharma, Jacquard, Greener Shades,
and Prochem, wash fast acid dyes. Yep.
So those are the 4 that you'll see in the book. I cannot believe it. It has been an hour. We need to stop for today. Alanna, you are a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Yeah, if any of the questions weren't answered and people want to come and pick my brain, I do have a Facebook group that it's called Spin, Dye, and Create with Alanna. So feel free to come there. You can pop your questions in there. I'm happy to answer it. And I'm going to be doing a fun thing with spinners and dyers where I'm going to have like people submit photos, right? And those will be like a color inspiration photo and like to vote on them. So we'll do like a color of the month palette. And then I'll create it so that my dyers, they'll be able to get those color palettes, because then they'll know what people want and we can have this kind of fun conversation between the spinners and dyers.
Now tell me the Facebook again.
So it's called Spin, Dye, and Create with Alanna. And I can send it to you.
I'm typing it.
Okay.
All right. Hopefully I did that right. All right. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Go to her website, go to the Facebook. Her website is right up here, alannawilcox.com.
Yep.
There's all kinds of information about her book. Again, remember, she'll be at Convergence. If you like what you've heard today, go check out her class, see if that's something you might want to do. Thank you again, Alanna.
My pleasure.
It's amazing the knowledge you have.
Thank you. I'm very grateful for you having me here. So thank you everybody for spending your time with me too. I do appreciate it.
And speaking of a source of dye, thank you to Greener Shades for sponsoring Textiles and Tea today. They are listed in her book. They are one of the sources for dyes for her. And again, keep in mind, they are a non-hazardous, non-chrome, low impact, heavy metal free dye for silk, wool, nylon, and any animal fiber. So again, they are very environment and people friendly. So go check out Greener Shades. Once you get our book, that's where you probably want to go and start getting some of those dyes. Again, if you would like to sponsor Textiles and Tea or your business or your guild, please go to the website weavespindye.org. There are places on there that I'll explain to you how you can sponsor an episode of Textiles or Tea, or you can give us a call or email us. We also want to thank the people who donate to the Fiber Trust. We are generously supported by the Fiber Trust. If you like programming like this, like we had Spinning and Weaving Week, we have a bunch of programs coming up this spring. Go online and join or donate, or both, to HGA at weavespindye.org. Again, Convergence, registration's open. Be sure you check on those classes that you want to get, and make sure you get signed up. If you missed an episode, if you want to watch this again today, there was so much information, and you probably do want to watch it again. Or if you want to invite a friend, if somebody that you know likes dyeing, they need to see this episode. You can watch it on Facebook. You do not have to have an account. You can just watch it on Facebook. Next week, we are so excited because we are going to have Kim Winter, who's going to be our guest. Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it. Have a great week. Happy tea.